once you create a policy, let's say on a particular floor for some type of network, we could almost have AI recommend the right policies for your entire digital enterprise.
How have you enabled your infrastructure? Fundamental change over the last 5 years, and partnering with the business is critical. Tools exist on the cloud, change at the rate necessary, secure by design.
Network Disrupted.
Hey, it's Andrew, and welcome to Network Disrupted, where IT leaders talk about navigating the disruption in our industry. In this episode, we talk about what merit analytics, or rather, the dirty words artificial intelligence, has in the context of digital transformation. My guest today is Vishal Gupta, CTO at Unisys, the 100-year-old IT company we all grew up around. Unisys has recently gone through fairly significant and positive transformation, which is something Vishal's been focused on since he joined in 2018. Vishal also has a really big interest in how talent impacts any business plan, so we spent some time talking about that in this episode. Let me know what your thoughts are. You can tweet me at Network Disrupted, leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or email me at andrew@networkdisrupted.com.
So Vishal, thank you for joining us. Really looking forward to this conversation.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You know, I'm very careful, for instance, at Blue Cat in my role of not leading with analytics or AI in terms of why our products are good, because it's not the fact that we have analytics that make them differentiated. It's what the outcomes are and what value we can create. And I worry that in the industry, too many companies are sort of leading with ours is better because we have analytics, or we have AI, or we have ML, or we have whatever, as opposed to it being a consistent strategy across many different things that's driving outcomes.
So I think firstly, I want to completely agree with you that, some of these technologies get hyped so much. We've seen that with blockchain. To some extent, it's with AI as well, right? Which actually can act as a deterrent ultimately to progress, because these are means to an end. These are not end on its own, right? These are all about driving the right outcomes.
Right.
I spent a lot of years prior to Unisys at Symantec, and there was a time in the security industry where every vendor would talk about, hey, my security is better because I use AI. Then everybody started saying I had AI, and then they start talking about the size of the data lake, right? So it just kind of was a nonsensical journey. Now, having said that, I do believe there is a very real and compelling use cases for AI. If we look at the IDC report, it sort of shows the overall spend on AI and cognitive to grow from almost 24 billion in 18 to 77 billion in 22, which is a huge CAGR of over 37%. So we know there is something real there. The question is, what are those outcomes that could be real? What things can AI do today that actually can can create some interesting things?
Right.
And AI is very good at things like classification and comparison.
Yes.
So we use the classification capability in AI to really not just discover different types of digital equipment, but categorize what type of equipment it is. So now we know, okay, you've got so many switches, so many routers, so many different types of equipment. And then through comparison, once you create a policy, let's say on a particular floor for some type of network, we could almost have AI recommend the right policies for your entire digital enterprise, right? So that way you do something once and it sort of reinforces the learning it learns from, and says, okay, just like Amazon can say based on the books you read, which others you might like, based upon the policies you applied, which other equipment with similar policies apply to
Right.
it. The second, I think, very, again, low-hanging fruit in the world of AI is using AI to really improve your customer experience and sales and support process. Because no matter what business you're in, even if you're in a nonprofit, you'll have a certain set of customers who you interact with. So for example, these days, as we've seen with natural language processing, whether you leverage it from an Alexa or from a Google, there's a lot of advances, right? So in the way that you interact with your customers, you should be able to leverage AI to essentially build out intelligent chatbots, which can both reduce the cost and provide a better experience. To know, when to escalate to a human, when to be able to answer the questions that a customer is having or employee is having, and to be able to, essentially sort of get to this holy grail of both cheaper and better, right? Usually it's one or the other. So this whole thing around natural language processing, NLP, uh, and mixing that with automation and AI can, I think, give almost a 30 to 40% improvement in the way you interact with your employees or customers in terms of answering their questions, and without them having to wait as they used to have to in the past in a call center environment.
Right, but then also, and I think this is the key. Also, it's something else you're collecting data about, or something else you can measure, and I think that that becomes the reservoir. That becomes, you now want to measure something else, some level of customer engagement, for instance, or customer success, or understand where, for instance, your customers are asking questions. And any way you can measure those conversations, those interactions, can lead to different, for instance, product strategies, or some understanding of what where your customers are struggling, or where there might be opportunities based on the sorts of things they're asking. And yes, for sure, through natural language, but we do it on everything from all of our customer interactions with customer support, for instance. These are things that can drive a lot of intelligence on what's going on in the market. And yeah, so it's this hunger for data. And then I think companies both have to leverage that in services like, you mentioned, certainly on the NLP side, leverage it, not build their own, but also I think need a strategy in general for how they're going to collect data and utilize that data, from everything from health of systems and services and security, but also at higher level customer interactions and those things as well. I think just that mindset of everything we build and deploy needs to be measurable, observable, needs to give us the telemetry so that we can figure out anything based on it, right?
Andrew, very well said, and I 100% agree, because any journey with AI is going to be a journey, right?
Right. What really interests me is how we assure that the system is working based on the customer's intent, and that requires, and this is, I think this is a key part of it. You can't just, to build these systems, you need the data. It's the whatever, the network data effect, or the data network effect. You need data in order to analyze the data, to understand, to build strategies, to get more data. And the more data you get, the better your value can be, the more value you can generate. And so a big thing companies struggle with, I think, is how do they get that data? How do they get the data from the customers? How do they get enough data in order to make the analytics meaningful?
As you continuously gather a lot of data, the ability to do clustering and get insights from the data about questions that you don't even know, right, is very compelling. The one thing I would add is that in addition to the focus on data, we have also seen, for example, that many times people focus so much on getting the data, cleaning the data, that they don't put sometimes enough focus on, what would be the most compelling use cases, let's say, once they had the data, right? What are the most important problems? So I think it's a question of a nice balance. They need to sort of also know which things are going to be truly, are going to truly move the needle, which are the most important questions, and then how do you get the data to be able to either answer or refine those most important questions. And then I think the only other thing I would add is that the world of AI is a journey, right? Because even once you have a large set of data, essentially what you are doing with AI is to predict with a certain confidence interval, uh, let's say as part of a prediction and answer, right? And obviously, the more data you get, the more accurate your predictions can be. But AI can also suffer from things like what's called false positives, which means you are saying something is true. Let's say you're at a border crossing and you're saying, hey, this person might be a problem, and you're flagging these people. Now maybe you are always able to get the bad people, but you also end up getting 10 good people for every bad person you get, so you end up creating a lot of lines. So in the world of AI, I think the amount of data is very key to make sure that both the accuracy and the false positives, accuracy is high and false positives are low. But then you also need to know what are the right use cases that you're really after. And
Yes, I agree with the points you made, and I've certainly seen examples of part of it's just systems in general, right? So I'm going to use AI or whatever to optimize this part of a system to make it leaner, faster, cheaper, whatever the case. But what's the knock-on impact effect on its related systems? And you gave a good example with lines. So if I make this way faster, given it may have false positives or whatever effect it might have, does the next thing in the system need to change as well? And I don't think people. I think people do local optimization or think more often about local optimization than system optimization. Are we really optimizing the right point on the system, to meet our requirements? And it always comes back to requirements. I mean, what are we trying to do as a business? The exploratory side of data, I have no idea what I might find. Let me just play is a swimming pool I like to jump into a lot. But yeah, that's just one piece of the puzzle. But I think the exploratory piece is quite interesting.
yeah, I think one of the areas that I've seen a lot of promise in AI is an area called anomaly detection. So AI is very good at finding patterns, right? So it can say, hey, no human can, really digest data coming from, say if you've got 50 or 80,000 devices, right? Very hard to sort of understand what's going on. But AI is good at that, right? It can figure out the data that's coming from lots of different devices and say, this particular device never was connecting with something else and transmitting this level of data, right? Something strange is going on, and that could be very helpful in security, for example, right? So there's problems that AI is very good at solving based upon all the things we've seen, and there's ones that are more, I would say, exploratory in nature. When you start talking about the bias or the right data not being clean, or not having the right sort of signals that you've collected as part of it. So that's where I think the balance comes in, to neither hype AI nor to be so afraid of it that you don't leverage it, right? That's where the balanced approach is needed.
Yeah, no, sure. And anomaly detection is certainly a very interesting area to us as well. As we look at, I mean, it could be something as simple as, in the world of DNS, a user-driven device peels off 4,000 or 5,000 queries in a day to spread across a variety of different domains, split across worky type stuff, and what you might be doing during lunch hour type stuff. And all of a sudden, if that number changes dramatically, or if it skews towards a certain type of domain or single domain or 2 or 3 domains, it becomes obvious pretty quickly to a human looking at it. You don't necessarily even need AI, but to get finer differences, you certainly do. And that's where we think about it a lot. What is the baseline, what's normal, and how can I spot an anomaly? Let's hit the talent question again. It's a conversation I have quite often, and certainly as we've gone through our journey at Blue Cat, or as I look at what my customers are investing in, it brings up this conversation over and over and over again. How do we ensure that we have the talent base to drive, whether we're talking about security or data-driven strategies or digital transformation in general? Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic that you're asking, because ultimately, I think your talent, your ability to attract the talent, retain the talent, engage the talent, is going to be the biggest factor that determines whether your business plan is going to be successful or not. And so We take this area perhaps as the most serious area in terms of the driver for success. When I joined, as I mentioned, about a year and a half back, we looked at, we've got about a couple thousand engineers spread about through 6 technology centers. And, I did a sort of inventory around, what skills do we have versus what do we need in this new world to be successful. And as we, talked with a lot of analysts, did a lot of internal brainstorming, talked to our board, we figured there were 5 key technology competencies that we wanted to develop. And we created sort of these 5 cross-functional teams to create the content for what we would call as a learning track. Each of the learning tracks ended up having about 20 pieces of content, which took about 8 hours to digest. And we sort of thought, okay, every 2 months people could do one learning track. And so over the year, they could do the 5 learning tracks. And we weren't quite sure, what level of adoption we will get. But we wanted to kind of see, how our team would respond to it. We wanted to measure everything as we discussed with data. So we wanted to, as soon as people finished any of either the learning track or the component of the learning track, we wanted them to kind of, quickly give us feedback on a survey, 1 to 10, how effective was the content. We were blown away by 3 things. One, people actually adopted this far more vigorously than we thought. And that was because they realized, right, knowledge is key. We can't give them job security, but they can get career security if they got the right skills, right? So these things gave them sort of the right skills, and they really resonated with it. Number 2, they gave us a lot of feedback. We very quickly figured out which content was good, which was not, and we drove this continuous improvement. And so ultimately, we ended up having almost a 9.3 on a scale of 10 for the overall content that got developed. So we were very pleased with that. And third, instead of it taking 10 months, which we thought is the time we'd given for people to do it, the average person got this done in 7 months, right? So they actually embraced this far faster than we thought. And so that was the year 1 of our journey. Now we're sort of developing what we call as the intermediate and advanced learning tracks in these areas to be taken by a subset of the people instead of all the people who are interested in it. And obviously, we brought some talent from the outside as well.
I think that's great, and it's almost you need that combination. Certainly learning. And then certainly, if there's areas where there's not enough experience, where you can't have mentoring as part of that learning, for instance, and there's a little bit of hiring. But yeah, I think when talent becomes people, when you're now working with individuals, and those individuals have career ambitions and learning ambitions, and you're making this less, you're making it more real, more about the people that you have on the teams, and aligning what you need as a company with where those people want to grow. And really, I think nirvana is when you're able to match your need for certain skills and capabilities with the desires and ambitions of an employee base. Now you have the ingredients you need to transform what that employee base may be able to do, and at the same time create a great deal of engagement, because you have people, and those people are immersed in this learning journey as well.
Yeah, I think it's well said. And actually, that's our focus this year, because I think one thing we did well and one thing I would say we didn't do well. The thing we did well was we got everybody super excited and kind of trained up on these things. The thing that I think we're going to try to do better this year is to really do that match between the areas people are more interested in and where there's a business need, and get them trained up in those areas. So, their new skills match with the work they're doing. And so we wanted to make sure everybody had a base set of skills, which now they do. And now I think for the next step in the journey, we'll hopefully do exactly what you're saying, which is try to, see if we can drive their interest with alignment with the next step of knowledge, with the alignment of the work that we know we'll have for them this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, but before it, I mean, just at the very basic level, like in software organizations, you can't grow, there's no business need to grow 100 software architects. There is a business need to grow a couple, and then also grow some principal engineers and some other very senior roles, and
Right.
and so I think it's people's desires, their competencies, and it's frankly, it's part of the digital transformation journey as well. Is what tools and what data can I use to help solve for this? But at some level, I think it's just what's changed in employee engagement and things like career plans, and that alignment, I think, is super difficult to do, but it goes into who you're trying to recruit as well. If you're specifically, if you're adding net new people on teams, then where do those net new people want to grow in their career is a crucial part of it. But I think that part of what makes a company successful is something that oftentimes isn't top of mind and should be top of mind. A prior guest, David Markwell, said it really well. When at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what these technologies are. There are people that are doing these things. There are people that are implementing. There are people that are understanding business requirements. There are people that are making decisions. And as employers, I think that's a critical part of what we do. Well, fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think these topics, certainly employees and people and talent, but artificial intelligence in general and security is something that we will be talking about for many years, to say the absolute obvious.
I really enjoyed it as well, Andrew. I think it's very fascinating what you've done at Blue Cat, and congratulations there on all the progress as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you for listening. I'd love to know what you thought of this episode, and I'm all ears if you have a guest recommendation. You can tweet at Network Disrupted, leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or email me at andrew@networkdisrupted.com.